The next topic is Java logging. So here we are going to cover a bunch of logging related topics. So let's move on with what is and why Java logging. So Java logging APIs are present in java.util logging package, and so the core logging package includes support for delivering plain text or XML formatted log records to a variety of output streams, such as memory output streams, the memory or output device like a display device, consoles, files, and sockets, and things like that. So why use Java logging API? So during development it could be used as debugging tool. So you might want to display certain values or something to see whether things are behaving as expected. After deployment you might use logging to capture some information about the application, how the applications are in fact running. Okay, so these log reports could be collected and could be analyzed. Okay, so for example, you might log some kind of security failures or configuration failures, performance information, and things like that. Okay, so this log information could be used later on for some analysis of the application. Okay, so let's talk about the architecture of Java logging framework. So in Java logging framework, it is actually made of two things. One is the logger and the other one is handler. Okay, so the logger is basically the ones that application make logging calls. So it basically application will acquire logger object, and then logger object basically create the log record object, and those log record object represent each log, and those log record will be handled. Okay, now both logger and handler can have a filter. So in the case of logger, you can use a filter to log only the things that you are interested. In terms of handler, you might want to actually, even the logger actually send that particular log, you can actually filter out the things that you don't want to handle. And the handler also actually has a formatter, because it could actually send out the information in the form of XML format or text format and things like that. So you could certainly plug in different formatters as part of the handler. So we'll see how these things work together. So filter and formatter, as I mentioned before, both loggers and handlers may use optional filters to decide if they are interested in a particular set of log records. Okay. And again, the handler could also have optional formatter in terms of how the log message is supposed to be formatted before it sends out to the I/O device. Okay, so logging example. So here, suppose if you have an application, you can actually create the logger object. So first thing you do is you call the get logger, a static method of logger, the class. Okay, and then you are going to specify. Actually, this is this is basically where you want to create the logger object. So you specify typically a package that you want to create a logger object. Okay, so once you got the logger object, and then you can actually call you can actually create the log message in two different ways. One way of logging logging a find message is actually called find method, or you can actually call the log and then you specify the level. So as you will see in a few minutes, the find or warning, those are actually logging levels. Okay, so either of these the option is okay to use for creating a log message. Okay, so here if I want to write this log find statement with this scheme, then I can say logger.log, and it's going to be level.find, and then comma, and then I can specify doing stuff or something like that. Okay, Alright, so let's do simple logging, exercise 1.1. So here you are going to run very simple application. So it's actually simple logging example, and then you're going to, yeah, so this is the pretty much the same code that we have seen in the slide. So the package is going to be different, okay. Then we are going to log the info level message, and here we are going to this is a severe level message, and this is another info level message, okay. So when you run the application, you should see info and severe and info, okay. So that is so I'm gonna just let you do this exercise in a few minutes, okay. So logging levels. So we have already seen the logging levels of find or debug or warn and things like that, right? Okay. So the logging level gives you gives a rough guide to the importance, rough guide on the importance and urgency of a log message. Okay. So basically, log level objects encapsulate an integer value. So these log levels are integer values with a higher value indicating higher priorities. So from the most severe has the highest number, and the finest is actually the lowest priority. Okay. So in order to set the log level, you're going to say logger.set level, then you specify level.severe. So meaning you want to log the message only on the level of severe and above, okay. So default log level could be configured based on log manager configuration. So so when the client code sends a log request to logger objects, each logger keeps track of the log level that it is interested in and discards the log requests that are below that level. So it's going to keep track of only the logger objects that is above the default level and above, okay. So now let's do exercise 1.2. So here we are going to set the level to severe. So in this case, when we run the application, we are going to see only this the log message, because everything else is below this, so those will be discarded, okay. So let's run the simple logging example code, example 2. So here, if we run the application, we are seeing only just severe message. Now if you change the log level to something else, so let's change it to this time info, okay, info, like this, and then you should be able to see all three messages, because info level message is also being caught. Okay. Now if you can take a look at the level of the log level from the Java documentation. So you can see the severe is the highest, and then warning, info, config, find, finder, and finest. Okay. Alright, so I am going to just move on. Okay, so handlers. So handler and formatter. So handler is the one that receive log record object from the logger object, and then is responsible for publication of it. Okay, and each handler is configured with a filter, optional filter, and optional formatter. Okay, as a default, the default formatter is going to be standard output device. Okay, so these are the types of handlers, by the way. So stream handler, and console handler, and the file handler, and socket handler, and memory handler. So these type of handlers are pre-configured with a particular formatter, for example. So stream handler is a simple handler for writing formatted records to output stream. Console handler is the handler for writing formatted records to system error device. File handler is to a file, and socket handler is to send something through the socket. Memory handler is writing things in memory. Okay, so setting up a handler for a logger is like this. So first you create a logger object, right? And then you are going to create, in this case we are going to create a file handler. Okay, the file that we want to write our log messages is now mylog.xml file. Okay, and so we create a file handler, and then we are going to add this handler to the logger. So the logger will know which handler is actually supposed to deal with. Okay, so that's pretty much it, and rest of the code is the same. Okay, so in this case, now the logger object will now actually send the log message to the file handler. Okay. Okay, so exercise 2. So let's do exercise 2. So the first is logging to a file, and the second we are configuring multiple handlers. Okay, so this is the configuring file handler. So this is something that I showed you in the slide. You are basically creating a file handler, and then you are going to add that file handler to the logger. So logger knows which one to use. Okay, now we are going to, oh, by the way, yeah, so this is actually adding it. So the existing handler, which is a console handler, is still being used. So in this case, what you are going to see is you are going to see the logging message on the console handler as well as an XML file. Okay, so that is what happens. So let's actually try that. So let's see, what is the handler? Log to file using, okay, log to file. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so here we are going to run the code, and you can see the console handler as a default is still receiving log messages, and we can now see, if you go to log file handler, we now see my own log file is also actually receiving it as well. Okay, so if I, just to make sure that this is not the file that that was actually created before, I'm going to just remove this file and let's try again. So I'm going to delete this file, and now let's run it again, and run it. Okay, now we are going to see the file, so it's created. Okay, yes, in fact it gives you a time, 2013 August 22nd and 13, so that is 1:53, and that's the time that we just run it. Okay, alright, so that is the 2.1. so that is actually for configuring file handler. Now 2.2, we are going to we are actually using multiple handlers, file handlers and console handler. Yeah, so console handler is actually, as a default, is actually included. So I mean, this is the case that we are actually manually adding it. Okay, so yeah, in this case it's probably not much different from what we actually have seen in the 2.1. Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna give you about 7 or 8 minutes to finish this exercise. Okay, logging methods. So we have seen examples of logging methods already. So you are able to actually use these two different styles of logging methods. Okay, so you can specify the this is a bit more complete, the method warning and string, source class and source method and string message, or you can just specify the message. Okay, now next is formatter. So formatter is actually configured with the handler, right? So formatter provides support for formatting log records. So each log handler will have a formatter associated with it. Okay. So basically, what formatter does is takes the log record object and convert it into the format. For now, ready-to-use formatters that come with the JDK include the simple formatter. So this is just the humanly readable summaries of log records, typically the message you see, or you can use the XML formatter. Okay. You can also create the custom formatter. Basically, formatter is an abstract class, and abstract class has a format abstract method. So your custom formatter will just implement this format, the method, and you can format in any way you want. So this is the XML output of the logging message. Alright, so let's do exercise 3, formatter. So we are going to use a very simple formatter. So let's actually, this is the example of the formatter that we are using. So let's run the simple formatter example. So if I'm running this application, this is the formatter. This is 2 log message that are using our own formatter. So let's take a look at the code. So we are basically setting a new formatter, calling set formatter method of this handler object. Okay, so basically we get the console handler object. For that console handler object, we decide to use our custom formatter. So we are going to create the formatter object providing format method implementation. Yeah, by the way, this is an example of inner class. Okay, so we are creating an object formatter by providing implementation of format, and in this case what we want to do is basically from the log record we decide to display the level and class name, method name, and get message, and then we use this a little bit of funny characters. Okay, so now when we run this application we are basically displaying this format. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to give you the few minutes to try things out. So, you can certainly change the format you want here and see whether that is actually displaying in a way you want. Okay. If you take a look at the formatter class Java documentation, yeah, you can see in fact the format is the abstract class, abstract method. Okay, so formatter is in fact abstract. This is abstract class, right? Because it does have format abstract method, which needs to be implemented. Okay, all right. So XML formatter and simple formatter, those are the ones. In fact, if you actually go to simple formatter or XML formatter, you can see XML formatter should have implementation of format. Basically it should have its own format implementation. Okay. Filters. So filter can be used to provide fine-grained control in terms of which one you want to log and which one you want to publish. So you can have a filter for both or either or logger or handler. Okay, so the filter has is loggable method. So you are going to configure each filter which contains this is loggable method, and each loggable method of the filter will be called for each log message, and it will be filtered. Okay, so if is loggable returns false, then the log record will be discarded. Okay. Alright, so let's do exercise 4. So exercise 4 is filter. So here we are going to have a very simple filter. So we are going to so this is actually before setting the filter, and this is after setting the filter. Okay, so let's take a look at the code. So here set the filter. So here we actually implemented a filter, and the filter contains is loggable the method. Okay, so you can tell that filter is probably abstract class, and now you provide the is loggable method implementation. So basically whatever logic you want, you can just check whether a particular log record parameter is instance of a particular class, whatever. So in this case, you do provide whatever filtering logic of yourself, and depending on the logic, you're gonna return true or false. Okay, so that's for that one. And for that two is here we're gonna use both filters and formatters. Okay, so if you take a look at this, we set the filter, which is actually alt filter, which is actually defined right here. Okay, so again, it should actually provide is loggable the method implementation, and it check whether the message is dividing by 0 or not. Okay, if it is not, it returns false. If it is, then it returns true. It's some kind of contrived logic, and so that's our filter. So we basically configure filter for the logger first. Okay, and then we have added file handler, and then file handler we are using text formatter, and then we are going to add that handler to the logger, and for the console handler we are going to use line formatter, and then we are adding the console handler to the logger. Okay, alright, so relatively straightforward the exercise. So I'm gonna give you 10 minutes for this. Actually I'll give you just 5 to 6 minutes. Okay, next topic is logger hierarchy. So loggers can have parent and child hierarchical relationship. So in this case, basically parent logging level is inherited by the child. So you could actually have a parent logger who sets the logging level to something, and that will be inherited by child logger. So this namespace sam.logging and sam.logging.child, this logger, the second logger, will inherit logging level from its parent sam.logging. Okay, so exercise 5 is pretty straightforward, and so in this case we are going to run hierarchical logging project, and what you're going to see here is we have defined, let's take a look at the parent logger first. So here parent logger create the logger object with the sam.logging namespace, and it sets the logging level to severe. Okay, and then we have a child logger that actually has child namespace from the parent logger, and this one is set as level to null. Okay, now when we are running the main application here, we created parent logger and we created child logger, and then we actually call the child loggers a method. So if you take a look at the child loggers a method, it's actually logging with the info level and severe level. And now what you're gonna actually see is only a severe level, because the child level is actually taking a default log level from the parent. Okay, so you might want to actually change this parent logging level to level info, and try level off as well, and see what result you get. Okay, I'll give you a few minutes to try this. So let's move on to the next topic, which is log manager. So there is a global log manager that keeps track of all the global logging related information, including these hierarchical namespaces of named loggers. So it will keep track of all the named loggers. Okay, it will also actually keep track of control logging properties file read from the configuration file. Okay, so you can get the log manager object by calling get log manager static method from log manager class. Okay, Yeah, so this log manager object gets created during log manager initialization based on system property. Okay. All right. So let's actually run the this log manager example code. So this is a log manager example code. In this case, we have actually configured the multiple loggers. Okay. So this is actually hierarchical logging exercise. You have done it. And so we have actually sam.logging.child, sam.logging. Then we have a global logging. And then we have actually, I think this is actually null here. Okay, so if you take a look at the logging monitor here, we should be able to get the, so we have a parent logger and child logger, which actually we created it. And so if you call the get log manager from the log manager class, and you get the log manager object, okay, and then at that point log manager should have all the initialization to be done from the log configuration file. And here then we can actually check all the loggers that are configured. Okay, so you can call the get logger names, okay, and then it does provide enumeration of the string as a result value, and then we can just display it. Okay, so that's why you are basically displaying these things. Okay, pretty straightforward. Configuration file. So the logging configuration file can be initialized using logging configuration file that will be read as startup. Okay, and the file is supposed to be in properties format, and this logging configuration is going to be initialized. So basically, system properties file, you can specify this configuration file. Okay, whenever you're actually changing something like adding file handler or adding another logger or something like that, you're basically changing the configuration during runtime. Okay, so here what we can do is we can find out log manager dot. So you can see you can add logger or you can actually read configuration. So if you take a look at the read configuration, the documentation, basically it's going to reinitialize the logging properties from the logging configuration. Okay, so if you have done some configuration, you made a change, and then you are going to call this read configuration, then it's going to actually go back to the starting point. Okay, so it's going to read the configuration file. So whatever dynamic configuration change you made will be, in fact, at that point will be lost. Okay. All right. So that is configuration. Now logging and performance implications. So logging implementation that comes with the JDK is highly optimized. Okay, and also other logging packages, for example, like log4j. Those are actually highly optimized in terms of in terms of performance, so that it should have a minimal impact in terms of the performance of the application. Okay, so if logging is disabled for a given log level, then logger can make a cheap comparison and test and run. It shouldn't really actually cause any significant performance implication. Okay, if logging is enabled even if logging is enabled at a log level, the logger will be still careful to minimize the cost before passing log record to handlers. For example, if you're trying to format into XML file, you don't want actually performance to be degrading because of the logger is actually changing it, to XML right at the point, right? So the logger implementations are careful so that those things will be done when things are not busy. Okay, so the localization and formatting, those things will be deferred until handler requests them. Okay, memory handler will, example, memory handler will maintain a circular buffer of log records without having to pay for formatting cost, meaning it will not actually format until it's being requested, or maybe it will find the CPU is not busy or something like that, to find a way to format it when it doesn't actually have any performance implication. Alright, so that is the end of the presentation. So let me